And good morning, everybody. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. David Bozell joining us from For America on 107.5 FM, 580 AM. You can reach him at foramerica.org. David, good to have you with us.
Kevin, how are you?
Still employed, thankfully.
Hey, so am I. So we got that going for us, which is nice.
You know, it is.
To quote the great Bill Murray.
Indeed. David, we've been talking about this for quite some time. In fact, here in Idaho and maybe some others across the country are doing this as well. We've adopted the mantra, the Stop the Socialism Express. And you as a young man, could you ever believe that in America today we'd have people younger than us embracing socialism?
It was funny. I got swept up in Google search vortex. Kind of researching some old CPAC stuff. And I came across a quote from Ronald Reagan way back in 1975, which I think was like his third speech at CPAC, in which he said, we've got to find a way to thwart the advance of socialism. And that's way back in 1975. So just to give you an idea how prescient he was, here we are, and you've got multiple members of Congress who are unapologetically brazen about their intent and about their wishes to see socialism be the dominant political philosophy and ideology in the United States. We can kind of goof on it and laugh at it, and which we should, and point out its inherent flaws, which we should, and how it's never been successful anywhere, like we should, and all of us are doing that. But all that being said, aided by the press, who give these folks just ample opportunities to sell and sell and sell, it's an uphill battle, and young people are susceptible to the message. If it's free, it's for me. And you've got guys like the Starbucks CEO who's trying to run for president, who politically I wouldn't agree with anything about anything that he's selling, other than the fact that he's fairly anti-socialist as well, and tried to lecture some of these kids down in Texas over the weekend at the South by Southwest conference, saying, "Look, there ain't nothing in life that comes for free." And of course, radical left-wing political junkies just beat him back with a stick. And so I just don't think that he's going to have a real place in left-wing politics going forward, because how dare he suggest that you can't get things for free? So it is, the rise of social media, the continued friendly territory, friendly confines of the liberal media allow these ideas, enable these ideas to take root. And now you've got members of Congress who get a lot of press, a lot of good press, talking about these issues. It's an uphill battle for everybody involved, and we've got to stay in the fight.
Our great friend David Bozell joining us. You can check him out at foramerica.org. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Let's go to the South by Southwest thing, because I thought it was a festival for movies, and then you have CNN down there interviewing some of the lesser-known candidates, and then everybody pandering. Is this what we can expect until 2020, where entertainment becomes overtly political?
Yeah, we just had a senior staff meeting about that. What is South by Southwest anymore? I thought it was movies, music. I mean, Austin, keep Austin weird. But it apparently is just this kind of left-wing CPAC. And so not really, it kind of has a little bit of a crisis of identity at this point. But it's these networks are just fawning all over themselves to try to interview all of these candidates in these town hall forums. You're going to see a lot more of them. Tulsi Gabbard just did her own with Dana Bash on CNN. Over the weekend. So they're just going to all take turns. None of them are going to go on Fox, which I think Fox will be. Fox will be just fine. But they're obviously Fox is pushing back on this notion that they're just a mouthpiece for the president. Fox does a very good job of separating its news product product and its opinion product, where these other networks do not. And I think that's one of the big lines of demarcation. But no, you won't see these candidates go on Fox. If you have any interest at all in the Democratic field, you're going to have to tune into these liberal networks who are going to just do backflips to try to get every one of these guys on some kind of a long-form town hall type of situation and make them look good with softballs. So it's until I think they'll probably keep the gloves on. All the candidates will keep the gloves on until the debates start to get in full swing, I guess, coming up in June.
David Bozell joining us, Kevin Miller here, KIDO Talk Radio. Let's continue on with Fox, because a lot of people have said that since Roger Ailes has left, it's gotten a little bit more to the left and not as Republican-friendly. Of course, you have Sean Hannity with his great relationship with the president and Laura Ingraham as well that have benefited. But people say the overall news college, particularly some thorny reaction to Chris Wallace. Is Fox in a tough position based on the fact that they're trying to perhaps get these Democrats on, but they've benefited more than anybody else from the president's popularity?
Well, what people don't realize that Fox has more liberals on its payroll than every other network.
Yeah.
And Chris is a tough interviewer, whether you're conservative or liberal. Political Washington understands that. The DNC, the party apparatus, would probably prefer not to put any of its candidates, no matter who they might prefer individually, but just as a strategic choice. Why put your candidates through a tough interview from a Chris Wallace? The voters should look at that and say, well, look, if this guy can't take the heat from a Chris Wallace interview, then what's he going to be like, or she going to be like in the Oval Office? How are they going to be able to deal with the trials and tribulations of being the president of the United States if you can't just take a tough interview? And Chris is tough on both sides. I mean, he's a straight shooter. Some of the anchors on Fox have been certainly more critical of the president than others. I mean, I don't think there's any love lost between Shepard Smith and this White House. I mean, Shepard is very, very critical and snarky about it too, and fairly nasty about his criticisms as well. And some of the daytime stuff follows that theme on Fox daytime. At night is where you get your opinion programming, and Fox is unapologetic about how they differentiate that. It's hard, raw news during the day, and at night you get your opinion hosts who have good relationships with the Republican president. That shouldn't be a shock. Frankly, if you're a Republican, I mean, how many times have we as conservatives, I mean, look at the George W. Bush White House, who conservatives had almost no relationship with. None, and the proof was in the pudding in terms of policy success. I mean, there just wasn't a lot of conservatism that succeeded within the George W. Bush White House, partly because the Republican establishment that worked for the White House at that particular time, kind of considered conservatives to be kind of the great unwashed. And just couldn't wait to fumigate the building anytime anybody entered. That was God forbid conservative. So I mean, how many times did they have to get remember Harriet Miers, that Supreme Court nominee that got pushed out of the way, by conservatives. Some of their immigration reform plans that got pushed out of the way by conservatives because it was not sufficiently conservative, and it was against what George W. Bush campaigned on. Frankly, they were liberal policy prescriptions that guys like Karl Rove, wanted to get across the finish line. And so we should be, I think, as conservatives, let's be somewhat thankful that our biggest mouthpieces, those that are selling conservatism to a nightly audience of millions of people, that they do have good, healthy relationships with people in power now. It's a good thing, and it's evidence of how hard the movement has worked to get in these positions to help this White House going forward. So, but in terms of a network, how people view the networks, it's just important that, and I think Fox has just done a terrific job of separating what is raw news, political, Fox News Sunday, et cetera, and then what are the opinion shows, and people can make decisions, based on those lines of demarcation. MSNBC, CNN, I mean, they're just you have no idea what you're getting from one thing to the next. I mean, Covington is the best example of this, Kevin, where every single anchor on CNN, this is why CNN is getting sued for $250 million, by the way, is because every anchor, the news anchors, were out there opining about these Covington kids and dragging their names through the mud. So, that's a good example of how the lines can get blurred from anchor to opinion host.
David Bozell joining us. David, we've got a couple minutes left in this segment here on KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Let's go back to the South by Southwest. I watched the Dana Bash interview and the Jake Tapper interview. There were no follow-ups. There was no, getting these folks on the record. She danced around the Assad question. They both danced around how they were going to pay for the universal health care. It's just kind of like pandering with an unlimited checkbook.
Right. Well, the AOC interview down there was a great example of this. She basically calls Ronald Reagan a racist, and the woman that was on stage interviewing her just let that one go right by with no follow up, and Ocasio-Cortez just filibustered the devil out of that. And it was just allowed to spew this invective about Ronald Reagan, who AOC's probably never picked up one book about Ronald Reagan. I'm pretty sure she was born after Ronald Reagan was out of office, and so she had no idea what she's talking about. And those folks that were participating in those forums down there just let her do it, because look. In a lot of ways, a situation like South by Southwest understands that, the promoters anyway, understand that they need her a lot more than she needs them. So, she's going to pick these friendly confines to do these cupcake interviews, and through her distribution channels, which are, in the millions, on Twitter and on Instagram. People just focus on Twitter, but Instagram is where she's bigger. And she just takes these cupcake clips that make her look good, spewing invective, and blast them out across social media, and it just enhances her stature with her base, which is increasingly socialist.
And David, hang on to that thought. More with David Bozell next. You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Kevin Miller in the morning, 107.5 FM, 580 AM, foramerica.org, David Bozell joining us. And David, we were talking about Ocasio-Cortez here, and I go to your site, quote, in U.S., if you don't have a job, you're left to die. And she just makes all these comments with no one challenging her, as you've pointed out.
Right. And I would dare her to sit down with like a Craig Shirley, who's, the foremost authority, the Reagan biographer, and dare her to suggest to Mr. Shirley that Ronald Reagan was racist. See what happens. She'd be tied up in knots. Craig would just tie her up in knots. Ronald Reagan did more for Hispanic employment than any administration before or since. Ronald Reagan, within conservative circles, has been criticized for his 1986 amnesty deal. Was that racist? Was it racist to give millions of people amnesty back in 1986? I don't think so. So this is just her. This is AOC's. That's not new. This has been her media strategy, especially after when she caught heat. She went on Fireline right after she was elected, and she said some really silly things on the new Firing Line show, and those things went viral, making her look silly. And so I'm sure her media people have decided, look, there's just, and the 60 Minutes interview was the same thing with Anderson Cooper, even though that was mostly a cupcake interview. But she tied herself up in knots on all sorts of issues on the 60 Minutes piece. Why do hard-hitting interviews if you are AOC and her people that want to promote her brand? Why put yourself through that? She talks a good game about wanting to take on all comers, but I think she settled into the strategy of, let's just go do friendly press at music festivals, and we'll just make those things go viral and we'll just go boom on the internet, and which is what happened. And it's left to conservatives to fight back against this stuff, but it makes it doubly challenging when you're not there, able to ask the tough follow-up questions. It's a tricky nut that we've got to crack. But she's going to leave a lot of conservative elected officials in the dust if she's allowed to just continue to do this good press that makes her look good without having any sort of confrontation.
David Bilzell joining us. David, hang on. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio, traffic and weather together. Let's get you to work safely and on time. Good morning, Dave. And back with our friend David Bilzell, KIDO Talk Radio, Kevin Miller in the morning, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Do you think, though, back to AOC, do you think that the Democrats have had enough of her and they will seek to primary her out of office?
I think they'll definitely seek to primary Omar out of office, for sure. I think she has no career whatsoever. They will definitely try to get. Look, there's an establishment wing of the Democratic Party just as much as there's a Republican establishment wing. The Washington Post has gone after both of these women, especially AOC in the last couple of weeks, and that is the Democratic establishment pushing back. Now there are opportunities out there in terms of where could you think, well, where could some music be made with an AOC if you're a conservative? Well, think about what might unite both sides here. What might unite both sides is that conservatives and AOC are now staring at these establishment forces that want to get rid of both of us. So there might be opportunities for some Freedom Caucus members to maybe band together with AOC. And maybe some kind of programming initiative, debate format. If she's really committed to taking on all comers and talking about her priorities with anyone and everyone, maybe do that with conservatives, with her conservative colleagues in the House. That could be must see viewing to watch a Jim Jordan and an AOC go at it in a Crossfire type of setting. Remember that old show Crossfire? Remember, I think if you just look at the state of cable news right now today, Kevin, a lot of it is fairly bland and boring. There's really no debate. You get CNN and MSNBC on the left, and Fox, on the right, and these hosts have these guests on, and everyone sort of agrees with the hosts for 50 minutes with 10 minutes of commercials. And it can get rather stale. I don't want to discount their importance, but they can get rather stale. I know a lot of talking heads, people in the political space that have grown tired of doing these programs because all you're doing is just sort of agreeing with the host all the time. And it can get fairly boring. And I think there might be a market out there for a return for a debate-style format. And if there's anything that social media has taught us, it's you don't need these hosts or networks to do it for you. You can do it yourself. So there might be an opportunity for conservatives in the House and maybe the AOC to band together, talk about these issues in a healthy way. Let's get these issues on the table and sort of kind of stiff arm the establishment of both wings. That makes everybody, that makes conservatives and AOC more powerful. And too big to fail, and that may not be a bad thing for conservatives, who I think, especially in the House, are searching for an identity right now.
Outside of Jim Jordan, I would agree with you to a degree, but I mean, AOC is just so far to the left when she's talking about Reagan being a racist, corporations owning the politicians. But the idea of Jim Jordan with her, and look, who doesn't long for the days of Bob Novak filling in for Pat Buchanan on CNN's Crossfire, and kids YouTube it? That was a real show. Today, you have to be cosmetically appealing, have to have 100,000 followers on Instagram, and all of a sudden you have the credibility of the dearly departed Bob Novak.
Right. How many former prosecutors are on these networks now? You think, they're all 25 years old. Like, they've all retired, from their defense days, prosecuting days. Like, what did you ever prosecute? We're not sure. But you're right. I mean, I don't want to sound like a bitter, curmudgeon about this stuff. It's important to have these social networks to help promote these programs. That's what these producers are looking for. I mean, that's important stuff, and good for them. But I think, you brought up she is kind of beyond the pale when it comes to saying things like Ronald Reagan was a racist. But what if, imagine a scenario where she said that in front of a Mark Meadows with his Southern, style, his gentlemanly style, and he can just take it to her. That's what you want. That's what you want in a democracy.
Now, hang on, David. Let me let's hold on to that thought for a minute. Our great friend David Bozell joining us. ForAmerica.org. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Good morning, Maggie. And for some reason, this has turned into the AOC. I don't know if it's the Welcoming Committee or the Admiration Society. David Bozell joining us from ForAmerica.org. Don't mark me part of that, brother. But, again...
You can hate the player, but love the game.
I suppose, because to me, she just seems like a kid that the planets aligned, and I hate to be a curmudgeon, and people, David, when you and I were in this business and we were a lot younger, looked at us the same way, that she has all the answers. But let's diverge a little to Representative Omar. You believe she'll be primaried, but what does it say? I mean, you're on the inside of the Washington politics, so if you could give us a clip here in the Gem State on, you're in the swamp, you're swimming, you're having a good time with all the other swamp creatures, on just how big a problem Omar is and the people that have rallied to her support, including Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders, and others.
Well, think about it this way. The Democrats passed H.R. 1 out of the House on Friday afternoon. Absolutely zero people realized they did that. H.R. 1 is just like every little goodie that Democrats have ever wanted. And just a huge attempt at stifling conservatism, free markets, whether it's electioneering law, campaign finance law, Green New, this, that, and the other deal. It's all in there. And they passed it because they've got the numbers in the House, and nobody cared. Nobody noticed. And McConnell's obviously not going to do anything with it anyway. But nobody knows. They couldn't even have any time to sort of like take a victory lap on that because they're all dealing with Omar. They're all having to answer for Omar. Every presidential candidate on the Democratic side is being pressed on Omar. You saw footage of, you might have seen footage of Cory Booker, who refused to take any questions. And he had some initiative that he wanted to brag about over in the Senate that was, obviously going nowhere. But he called a press conference to talk about that initiative, whatever it was, and he had a guest, poor thing, that was going to help him out. And there was not one single question on what he wanted to talk about. And he desperately searched for anybody in the room, any of the press corps, to ask him anything pertinent on what he wanted to discuss. And it was all about Omar, and he just refused, and that was the end of the press conference. It was it was a complete waste of time. It's exactly why they're going to try to primary her, because just look at it like Fox. Okay? They don't, it's the same thing. They don't want to answer any tough questions from the big bad bullies at Fox News, right? The same thing, same principle applies. They don't want to handle any tough questions about their colleague Omar because they can't answer them because she said something very anti-Semitic and very stupid. And they fell flat to try to respond to it, and they still don't have an answer for it. So, yeah, I do think that she's out of there one way or the other because she's just and she's already fundraising off of it, Kevin. I mean, I've got emails, forwarded to me. She's already trying to fundraise off of how, the awful Washington establishment is trying to keep her down. So she's desperate for money to make sure that she's got a little bit of a war chest to fend off a primary. So she knows it's coming. She knows her career here is going to be short. So now we could argue politically for conservatives, having her in there might be a good thing, because she obviously shines a spotlight on their radical philosophies that they're
David,
unapologetic about.
Let me jump in if I may, because I don't know. Maybe I've been raised from a distance, not like you, bred from the very beginning of Newsbusters and the Media Research Center. But I watch all the shows, and I'm sitting there listening and watching Katie Tur, the millennial that knows more than Pat McCurry, who was elected the mayor of Charlotte, governor of North Carolina, could have been a presidential candidate if things had gone his way. She knows more, and she and snarky Chuck Todd running to the defense of Omar, saying, well, look what some obscure sign in the West Virginia legislature comparing her to 9/11. And then the new one, well, the president talked about the folks in Virginia. And you think to yourself, we're not talking about these cases. We're talking about an elected member of Congress whose leadership cannot rein her in because they fear her.
Yes, they fear her as a threat to their agenda, as a distraction, I guess is probably the better word. They fear her as a distraction to their candidates at the national level. All those things that we've talked about. And they fear it just because they don't know what's going to come out of her mouth next. She's pretty brazen about this stuff. Remember, she's not really apologized for any of it. She doesn't really seem to notice or care very much that she offended Judaism, Jews. So it's a huge problem for them. But I only argue in a sane world, in a normal environment. Yeah, she should be just let out to pasture by a Republican should be zeroing in on her in terms of running against her. Democrats, I think, are going to primary her. So in a normal world, her radicalism would not stand for very long. But in a political dynamic, it may not be a bad thing for her to just be there, be one of 435, and let her just pop off. And Republicans and conservatives might enjoy some political benefits of having her radicalism be in the spotlight, and let Democrats be distracted. So that's all my only point there. I understand exactly what you're saying. She should be condemned.
Sure, and let me
by all forces.
But getting back to just the bias, and again, Pat McCurry and I used to do talk radio together, and I'm watching him on Meet the Press making the point that these folks. There's a lot of people that, they learned about life through life experience, and we don't want to bash on the millennials, but it's obvious that, just like all of us, we thought we knew everything at that age. He makes the point, and then you have Tur jump in and say, well, no, they've seen things. And I'm going, ma'am, you went from working at Politico to this big run at MSNBC. This guy worked his way up. Whatever happened to respect for people that may disagree with them, but have that life experience? And I think it's a little scary when you have an Omar, when you have an AOC, when you have all these folks that, again, have gone from, with all due respect, tending bar is a wonderful profession, to now setting policy and passing legislation. Yeah, and with some of the highest, national security clearances that you could ask for in this country. It's dangerous. In some ways, though, Kevin, I don't necessarily blame AOC or Omar or Tlaib. I blame the voters of Brooklyn 23, of Michigan 5, of Minnesota 4, wherever Omar's from. I blame the voters of these districts. Wake up. Understand what you're doing in terms of who you're submitting as your representative. Understand that this is your contribution to our democratic republic, and this is who you send our way to help represent you. That's who I fought. Some of these voters in these districts are just
simply not paying attention to what, or maybe are just so gullible to millions of dollars worth of advertising that have painted some of these women as not who they really are. And I blame some, and I also blame. No, look, if you're a Republican and you can't beat some of this stuff, some of these women back, you can't win in some of these districts. Man, you got to look yourself in the mirror as a national party. You got to look. How are you selling republicanism, conservatism in these districts? Because you ain't doing it very well. And so that's who I kind of laser in on in terms of who's to blame. The voters, but also the party apparatus on our side. And because it's not them. They said to themselves, hey, yeah, I attended bar, so I should be able to set policy, right? And they went for it. It's look at it this way too, Kevin. Look how aggressive Democrats are in the House vis-a-vis their policy priorities. It's just been a whirlwind of activity within these committees, nonstop. I haven't seen this level of activity since Obamacare was being crafted. They're on offense with their agenda. Now look what the Senate's doing on our side. I couldn't even tell you what McConnell's agenda is this year. I honestly couldn't.
Right.
I mean, judges, I guess. Okay. Where's our version of H.R. 1? Where's conservatives' version? Where's our answer to that? And if you want to talk about the Green New Deal, how about what's the free market approach to climate?
David Bozell, hold your thought there. More with David Bozell next. You're listening to Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. KIDO Talk Radio, foramerica.org, foramerica.org. David Bozell joining us. Kevin Miller with you here. As we continue on, join the conversation, 580-5436, 580-KIDO. So we talk about the agenda. I have to ask you about some of these Democratic contenders. You've got Bernie, Kamala, Corey. Does anybody really... Joe Biden, we expect an announcement any time now.
Yeah.
But let's just stick to the declared ones right now. What do you make of I guess, who the front runner would be if you had to pick one?
Ooh, a front runner and a Democrat, just in terms of name ID alone, it would be Biden. In terms of campaign structure, from what I've been able to see, because she has been able to sort of fend off some extraordinarily bad press, some of it self-inflicted, is Warren. She I think has a structure in place where she means business. I think Kamala is going to be a tough out. She does not have. Sometimes you'll see kind of like a worst of clips and that kind of stuff. Like a lot of, like Bernie Sanders, you can just find all sorts of silly stupidity coming out of his mouth at any moment, right?
Right.
Kamala really doesn't. I mean, yeah, she's aggressive in committee hearings to some Trump cabinet officials, but she's a former district attorney. It's in her DNA to be that way. She just doesn't have a lot in the opposition research department that you can kind of cling to. So to the extent that she kind of, but I don't know anything about her apparatus, right? So that's going to be tough. But she also has California to bank on. So in terms of delegates and those types of things, she's going to be a tough out. So I'd say Kamala, Elizabeth Warren, and Biden are in a tier one. Beto, I think he's jello. I just don't. If anyone that I thought that I could sort of tolerate in the Democrat side would be a Beto, because, and that's a stretch. I don't crucify me here, but only because I just think that he's like Clinton. He reminds me of Bill Clinton. He's willing to do anything. So I think you could probably move him fairly easily, whereas some of these other candidates are really committed to some of this radical left-wing stuff that they preach. So.
Right, but on the other hand, Rahm Emanuel said he's a loser, and I kind of agree with Rahm.
Well, I think Rahm needs to figure out what's going on in the Chicago crimes in his murderer up there before he starts sort of opining on Democrat presidential politics. But that's an example of we talked about AOC, Democrat establishment, and Rahm's one of them, that want to control the Democrat Party primary process. So he's a little bit of a kingmaker in the Democrat Party circles, and he's staking out some territory. But look, he obviously knows how to go viral and those types of things, which are necessary nowadays. They just are. If you want to have a seat at the national scene, at the national table, you're going to have to take your social media and your digital stuff seriously, and Beto certainly does. So that's why I kind of put him up there, but he's not tier one for me. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. I mean, Tulsi, I actually, she is my pick. Tulsi Gabbard from Hawaii. She's my pick to win because I think she's kind of like normal and low key, and that's going to make her sort of a little bit different. But we'll see what kind of apparatus she has.
Yeah, that's going to be a tough one. Traffic and weather together, KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Let's get you to work safely and on time. Good morning, Dave. And thank you, Larry. Appreciate the weather. We've got about 4.5 minutes left with David Bozell joining us from For America, foramerica.org. Kevin Miller in the morning. So back to just some of these big issues coming up. The border, we've got reports they're flooding the zone, if you will. The president fighting to get the wall up. What do you make of this?
Well, the president submitted in his budget here Monday that the funds necessary to complete the wall. That's good. Look, he hasn't been very adept at fighting for his own budget. I don't know if that's going to change this year. I hope it does, given the state of emergency that he declared. No recent administration has been very good at fighting for their budgets. I remember, Obama famously would have his budgets voted down 99-0. So I don't know why modern White Houses just cannot figure out a way to get their own budget blueprint across the finish line, other than just congressional appropriators just control all the levers. But look, in order for Republicans to succeed, and I include the president here, they're simply going to have to get serious about what it is that they want to accomplish going forward. The wall is important, and it's probably at the top of the issue list. But for God's sakes, they have got to figure out a solution to health care. Have to. I mean, it is something that we all interact with every day. The healthcare system that, frankly, Obama ruined. And the fact that the Republicans have not come forward with their own free market solution to it is political malpractice. Now, we can blame John McCain, thumbs down, all that stuff all day long. But, the time has come to get serious about it. Again, I point back to H.R. 1 and Democrat priorities. They're on offense. They've included even more types of socialized health care in these proposals that they are passing. And just there's no answer from Republicans on it, only to say that, no, we don't like that. Well, you got to be in the solution-providing business in order to get a lot of voters' attention. And so, healthcare's got to be up there. And then education, I mean, there's just, on the cultural front, there's so much that our children are being taught in the public education square. Now, especially in the culture front with these transgender issues, really scary stuff. Kindergartners being read books. I'm a girl in my mind, but a boy in my heart. That kind of stuff. This stuff is out there. You get National Reading Days sponsored by the Human Rights Campaign, which is left-wing homosexual lobby stuff. This stuff is serious, and it's in our education systems to kindergartners. So I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that stuff. And Republicans in the Senate and the president need to get their act straight here and put conservative cultural priorities up near the top of their priority list. I know he's focused on trade. I get it. I know that's his sweet spot. But some of these cultural items are worth fighting for. Democrats certainly think so. That's why they keep pushing them. So they're worth fighting. We need to come up with our own alternative solutions as well.
All right, Dave Boesel, 40 seconds left. Let's talk about the importance of life.
Well, the most important thing of life is March 28th, opening day. Baseball, and I'm going to my first opening day game, and I'm jazzed about that part of my life. So baseball is back, and that's a good thing.
Hope springs eternal. I was talking about the right to life. 20 seconds left, brother.
Right to life. Look, Title X funding was eradicated by Trump's HHS. Huge deal. That's huge. That's about $50 million annually that taxpayers save not going to Planned Parenthood. That's a big, big win for the president. Be sure to thank him on your feeds and on your social channels. They could use the support.
David Boesel, foramerica.org. We thank you for your support.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate it. Anytime.